Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We'll see if anyone else trickles in. But thank you for attending our 7th weekly policy meeting for the Our Salem project. The topic of tonight is community and public services and facilities. So everything from water, wastewater, stormwater kind of management to libraries. And with me tonight are a lot of staff. So Austin, Glenn, Jason, and Keith, just want to let you introduce yourselves.
Hi there, Austin Ross, City of Salem Long Range Planner.
Hi, Glenn Davis. I'm with Public Works. I'm the Chief Development Engineer and the Floodplain Administrator.
Hi, I'm Jason Pulley with the Utility Planning Group with Salem Public Works.
I'm Suzanne Kaltwasser. I'm the chairperson for East Lancaster Neighborhood Association, although I actually live in West Salem.
Hi, I'm Keith Garlinghouse from Utility Planning, Public Works.
Great, thanks. Selena, do you want to introduce yourself? It's a small crowd. Go ahead.
Sure, I'm the Willamette Valley Government Affairs Director for the Association of Realtors.
So as you all know, we are working on our Salem project. So today I'll just give a real brief overview kind of where we are. I think you're all kind of familiar with the project. And then we're really just going to kind of dive into some policy ideas and get your input. We're going to cover some policy ideas that were previously drafted as part of our visioning process, as well as some new ideas that come from research in other cities and newer community ideas. If anytime you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll answer them as we go. Or if you have comments, again, feel free to drop them in the chat. Might be a small enough group that you could just also raise your hand and we'll unmute. In any case, so the RCM project, just as a reminder, is a multi-year project to update our comprehensive plan. It really guides our future growth and development and shapes it by goals, policies, and a map that really cover everything from where different types of housing, for example, are promoted and allowed in the city to our priorities for our transportation system, to our impacts on the environment. So it's really kind of the big, broad framework that, again, helps us manage and guide the growth that's happening in the Salem area. And so this is a map that we always show just to make sure folks are familiar with both the city limits, which is the black dash line, as well as what we call our portion of the urban growth boundary. That's the gray area that you see here that includes unincorporated areas of Marion and Polk County. This is the area that we're planning for. So when you hear people talking about 60,000 more people by 2035, that's not within the city of Salem city limits, but in this gray urban growth boundary area. So we hit a major milestone in this project in March after about 1.5 years, 2 years of visioning in the community, where we really asked the community, what are your priorities for housing, transportation, economic development, natural resources, the environment, public services. We took all of that input and we rolled it up into high-level goals, as well as a proposed comprehensive plan map. And we brought that to council in a vision document and checked in March and asked them if they would accept that. Essentially what we were asking was, are we heading in the right direction? Is this the general framework that we should be working within as we start working on all the details of policies, zoning code, and zoning map? So they did accept the vision. It was not an official adoption, so nothing has been officially adopted and is final, but we are given at least the direction that we're heading in the right direction and we should continue working on the project. So tonight's meeting is really focused on detailed policies related, again, to public facilities and community facilities and services. So we've been meeting every Wednesday since late March on different topics. You'll see the schedule here. We've covered most of the topics. This is our last topic meeting. And next week we were going to have a placeholder kind of meeting, but because there's been a lot of interest in our proposed zoning map and the new interactive map we released, we're going to be talking all about that map. So if you have questions, concerns about the map, please join us next week. And then our goal is that on May 26th, we'll kind of do a high level, here are the big things we've heard throughout these policy meetings, and kind of report back to the community and allow time for questions as well. So for each section of the meeting today, we're going to present some ideas to you and then ask for your feedback. We're going to do some voting, and hopefully you've all tried the voting and it's worked before, but we'll test it out again. And then again, if you have questions or comments, feel free to drop it in the chat. So this is where we're going to practice the voting. I think you've all participated, but if you haven't, you can participate by either texting on your phone to the number 22333, and you text EKIM 847 in the text. Send that to 22333. You should get a text response that says you're entering or welcome to Eunice's session, or you can use a link, which I'll drop in the chat right now. And you can use your web browser, again, on your phone or on the computer. So we just want to try it out. The questions will automatically refresh, so don't feel like you need to kind of push a button to make it keep going. But the questions as we go through each one will change on your screen if you're using the web browser or a web browser. If you're using your phone, you can just text, like for example, A here or B, and the results will pop up live. So we only have a couple of people joining us on the Zoom call. If anyone's watching, you're allowed to, or you're welcome to vote as well. So I think there's only 3 of on the Zoom call. So I'm wondering, is everyone able to make that work? We're happy to troubleshoot some technical difficulties if there are any. Feel free to unmute if you're having some questions on how to vote.
Or if you don't plan on voting, please let us know so that we're not.
I'm listening to this on my phone. How do I vote when I'm already on my phone?
Yeah, so you can go to your text and text, instead of texting to a phone number or a contact, you text to the number 22333, and then instead of writing a sentence or the actual thing you put in the text is EKIM 847.
Say that again.
You text EKIM 847 into the text, and you send that to the number 22333.
Okay. I'm going to try it.
Okay. Maybe we'll wait a couple minutes and see if it works, and then we'll move on. And if you have problems, just let us know. Also, maybe I can talk while we're waiting on the.
I'll keep moving.
Great. So there's a lot of planning going on across the city. This doesn't capture even a small portion of it, but a lot of the work that's happening across the city really does overlap with the Our Salem project. So I just want to give a couple examples. The Climate Action Plan is one of the big citywide projects that's being led by the Public Works Department right now, and it's really looking at how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and how can we make our community more resilient. And so there's a task force and there's community input to really come up with strategies to, again, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build our resiliency. So there's a lot of overlap with our Salem project, so we're coordinating really closely with that project. In addition, the city recently, I think within the last year or two, updated our historic preservation plan. And so we just wanted to note that we're going to be taking the goals and policies out of that plan and rolling them up into the comprehensive plan. And then there's a lot of utility work going on that Jason and Keith and Glenn can speak to, updates and analysis that's happening. So the city's still working as we're doing this project. So this is just a vision statement that represents really the shared priorities that we have gathered in the community during the visioning process, and we included it in the vision document. You can see that it touches kind of on everything from housing, transportation, culture, the environment, really making Salem the Salem that everyone wants it to be in the future. And so all the goals and policies are really to support that vision and help make that happen. these are just a few examples of the goals related to public services and community services and facilities. Just wanted to show that they're pretty high level. So for example, the first one here is all about community gathering spaces. Is a topic that we've heard is a real priority in the community. And so the idea is through this work tonight and other work that we kind of drill down and see really what does that mean and how do we implement that. We have a proposed goal around increasing access to food. Again, another priority in recent years. It's not something that's currently covered in our comprehensive plan, but we have heard it's a priority, and so the idea is to have a goal related to that. Public facilities and services, really the focus of tonight. We have a broad goal again around that, as well as stormwater management. And again, historic preservation. So as you can see, these are pretty high level. They were, again, included in the vision document, and they're just a sample of the goals that we have. The goal of tonight really is, again, to look at some policy ideas that would support these and other goals, and really making sure that they make sense for Salem, that they're tailored to Salem, and that people understand them and agree with them. So I'm going to hand it off to Austin, and he's going to talk about some of the policies that we've previously drafted in our visioning work. And real quick, before I hand it off, I'm going to just ask Suzanne, did you get that to work, Suzanne? I think you're muted.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Suzanne. Are you trying it on your computer now?
I'm sorry. I was trying to find it to come up on my computer and it won't do that either.
Okay, let me
But I'm
put the
trying-
link. I'll put the link again in the chat, and you can just click on it on your computer, and hopefully that will work. Let me just drop it in. Okay,
Okay, I got it on my computer now, on my laptop.
fantastic. Okay, take it
Okay.
away, Austin.
Then I can listen on my phone and work on my laptop.
Technology.
Great.
I
It
know.
looks like maybe we had one other person join during that while Eunice was talking. So if you look in the chat for the newcomer, there's a link to some live polling that we're going to be doing about these policy ideas. So if you want to join that, that would be great. Or you can see the instructions on the screen right here. So we're going to start with ideas that we heard earlier in the process. Those ideas came from various community groups and various outreach that we've done. And we wanted to make sure we got those ideas down somewhere. So they were presented as draft policy ideas in the Our Salem vision. You'll see tonight that some of those ideas were summarized here. So our goal tonight is not to wordsmith these ideas, but rather to test the idea itself and decide whether that idea is right for Salem or not. So this is a small sample of the full list of policy ideas that we have. That full list is available on the project website, so we encourage you to go check that out. There's also a full list of new ideas that we're considering in addition to the ones that were in the Our Salem vision. So there's a lot to see in there, and these were ideas that we thought were important to test with the community. As we're going through this, there's a couple notes about language that I want to share. So when you see words like promote or encourage, that refers to incentives for people to do things. If there's language like required, then that would be a mandate. So just understanding whether we're talking about incentivizing something or making it mandatory is important. I think most of the ones we're sharing tonight are more about incentives, but if you look at the full list online, there are some that are more mandate oriented. So that's important to know. And then as we're going through these, if you have questions or comments about them, if you need clarification about the intent, please drop a link in the chat, or since we've got a small group, it's fine to just raise your hand and we'll unmute. So let's go to the first group of policy ideas. These ones are about community spaces and culture. So this first idea about community spaces is about encouraging public community spaces within businesses, schools, and other organizations. So this would be encouraging places within buildings that aren't necessarily always open to the public or wouldn't necessarily be open to the public in every instance, but encouraging spaces to be public and encouraging businesses, schools, whoever else to make more public spaces, because we've heard that there is a need for more of those in the community. The one about cultural places is more about designating cultural places within the Salem area, and that would be in collaboration with community organizations or the sovereign tribes to make sure that we're designating those places and making sure that they're preserved. After that is one about just encouraging art and allowing it more broadly in Salem, and especially locally created art. And then the one about open spaces is about encouraging more both natural and man-made open spaces throughout Salem. So whether that's preserving some natural open area that's maybe wooded, or whether it's about like encouraging more public plazas or things like that.
So, excuse me, is there a visual that you are speaking from, or are you just, it's just voiceover?
So the ideas are here in the presentation. So I don't know if you can see that on your phone.
I don't see the presentation. I did when Kim was talking, but now that you're talking, I don't see it. Am I missing something?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that would have happened. We haven't changed presenters, or like the slideshow hasn't changed. So I'm not sure how that might have happened.
Okay.
I wonder if you can change.
It popped up.
Oh, good.
I found it.
Great.
Thank you.
And I see while we're voting a question in the chat that says, can you describe community spaces? Does this mean meeting rooms? Yeah, that could mean meeting rooms, places for people to either rent out, or free spaces where people could hold meetings, or, you know, other types of community gatherings. We don't necessarily want to limit what that means exactly, but we do know that there are some, I guess, neighborhood associations, other groups that are that do struggle sometimes to find spaces to hold meetings. So that is included in this. So with this poll, we're asking people to vote for all of the ideas that they like. So you can vote for all of them or just a few of them, whatever you agree with. I'll give folks a little bit longer to vote here. Again, if you're having troubles, let us know. We'll see what we can do. And again, there's no pressure to vote for any of them if you're not feeling a connection with one of them. So. All right, it looks like people have cast some votes here. We'll move on to the next set of ideas, and you'll still be able to vote while I'm describing the next group. So these ideas have to do with public facilities and services, as well as one about stormwater management. So the policy about library services is about maintaining and enhancing access to library services, and especially in underserved areas. So we know that library services aren't distributed evenly across Salem, but this policy would be about looking at ways to expand that access to those library services while also maintaining the services we currently have. The one about community centers is about encouraging the development of more community services in Salem, especially in areas that currently don't have good access to those community centers, and encouraging those to serve all people of all ages and abilities. The one about schools is more about the city collaborating with the Salem Kaiser School District to make sure that the school services they're planning and our plans for how we manage changes in population growth are aligning and working together. So we've been collaborating with the district during this process, and we'll continue to do so, but this policy would codify that so that it was something that a policy that we would follow going into the future and making sure that their plans for growth align with ours. And then the one about.
So can I ask a question at that point?
Maybe, why don't I describe the last one and we'll get over to the poll and then I'll answer your question if that's all right. So this last policy idea comes from the stormwater management plan that was already adopted last year. This one is one that we're considering rolling up into the comprehensive plan. And it's about making sure we're identifying flood-related hazards and making sure that we're mitigating some of that risk, as well as providing information to businesses and residents. And so that's just an example of a policy that's already in place in that stormwater management plan that we think is important enough to move up into the comp plan as well. So people can start voting on those polling questions. And Suzanne, what was your question about the schools policy, it sounded like?
Okay. Well, my question is that currently there is, I think, an agreement with the school district, but it's not equal to what we had in the past. Is the vision to go back to what we had in the past, where there were spaces that were available to community groups for either no fee or very small fee? Or is this just a philosophical statement that we wish we had something we don't currently have?
I would say it's a philosophical statement, but not necessarily about wishing we had something we don't have. It's more about expressing a priority that we've heard from people within the community. So it sounded like you were talking about, was that one about the community spaces from the previous group or one of these?
Yeah, to align services. So there's a couple of possibilities. One is we don't currently collaborate with the school system about where they plan on putting future schools. I know that there are other communities in the state that they align their comprehensive plans so that the city knows exactly where they're going to potentially be placing schools, but the school district has been unwilling to share that information here in Salem. That would be one component. And then the other component would be being able to use the schools or the school properties for community-related events.
Gotcha. Eunice, do you want to maybe speak to that one? I know you've been in more communication with the district.
Sure. Am I unmuted? My computer's.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see me? Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Austin. So we have been collaborating with the school district since the beginning of this project, and we've talked to them about where we're proposing new growth, for example. And even before that, we had asked them kind of what their preferences are, if they have any, and we wanted to really understand what the impact of kind of at the high level comprehensive plan map, the proposed comprehensive plan map would be on the school district, and make sure that we were aware of, are we shifting their need for a school in a new location or new schools generally? And what they told us was that we are not. There is already a structural imbalance in terms of the kind of network of schools and the need for a new middle school, for example. And so our proposed comprehensive plan map isn't changing that need. That need exists and it is going to continue to exist. So as we kind of get more into details, we'll continue collaborating with that if that changes. But for now.
Okay. So I'm aware, because I used to be on committees within the Salem Kaiser School District, that they have a comprehensive planning map of their own. And that's what I'm saying. They don't share that with you. It sounds like you don't even know it exists. And one of the things that's happened in the past is that they look at a vacant area, because obviously they can't build over the top of houses without eminent domain. And that's the problem that they had with Straub, for example. But they have a map where they have a desire. They also own some properties and so forth. But anyway, they wanted to put something in East Salem at Corden and State Street. They looked at that property because that would be a perfect location, but the city approved a subdivision. So now that potential is taken off the map. And that lack of coordination not only creates difficulties for the school district, but it makes it difficult for the taxpayers, because without that kind of comprehensive joint planning, you don't reserve areas for them to put a school. For example, that's what Beaverton does or did, is when they did the comprehensive plan, they said, we're thinking about doing something in this particular lot, but if you want to put a school there, tell us now, so we don't zone that for something where you can't put a school. And then when an applicant comes in to do something with that property, you have the first right of refusal. So that way they know where the schools are going to go and where the subdivisions that would feed that school will be developed. And that kind of planning then gives more equity in distribution and keeps the costs down for everybody. So it doesn't sound like that's what you're doing, but that would be a nice thing to have happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, I don't think I've seen any sort of map. We just have had discussions with them. I mean, as you know, schools are broadly allowed in zones, but you're right that we have not reserved properties and said this piece
Well,
of property goes first to the schools, and if they say no, then it could be developed. We have not done that.
yeah. So my point is that they do have a map, and they're not sharing that with you. And that is something I would like to see the city push for, is that we need to be collaborating and identifying potential areas. If they don't want to make that necessarily open to the public, I can understand that. But internally, there used to be a state law that if a district was growing at more than, I think, 1% a year, they had to share it with local communities. But I don't know that I know the law still exists, but I don't know if the growth ratio meets the threshold where they have to do it. And I mean, like I said, I was on an internal committee with the school district, and I've seen the documents that they have for criteria and locations and a map with things mapped out. So the fact that you don't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, is my point.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I mean, the school district has been collaborating with us, so it's not that they're not working with us, but we'll continue to have conversations. So I appreciate that input, Suzanne.
So I see another comment about, or a question asking what community centers refer to, what type of facility. That could be a range of different types of facilities. It could be something like the Croc Center where it's more recreation oriented, or it could be like a cultural center for a specific demographic of people within the city, or it could be just a place like for teens to go after school. So it kind of encompasses a range of different potential concepts, but places that are that have programming that can be utilized by the public.
So I got another comment on that.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm old, so I know the historical situation. Salem Kaiser School District used to have what they called community schools, in which they opened up their facilities for, like their gymnasiums, for people to have community basketball games or events or so forth. And one of the reasons why they stopped doing that was because they had to have a facilities person on site. And they used to charge a small fee to cover that person's expenses. But I'd like to see that kind of a discussion come again, because we already have these facilities within our community that sit idle. And if you could have an agreement with the city of Salem that they would, through Parks and Rec or whatever, make some of those facilities available, we wouldn't have to build more infrastructure because it already exists within our community, but we'd have to work out the pay agreement and so forth. So it was wonderful to be able to have not an after school program, but in the evenings to have pickup basketball games, or to be able to have a volleyball team or something go into a school and use their gymnasium. It was wonderful, but it went away about 20 years ago.
All right, yeah, I appreciate that. That's definitely an idea that we can consider. There's a question about what determines need. I'm assuming that's in reference to making sure that the community centers are equitably distributed. I mean, there are certainly parts of the city that have more access to those types of facilities than other, or are located in closer proximity. So encouraging them in areas where they don't exist now would be great, but the city also isn't necessarily a land developer, so we can only facilitate that so much. So why don't we jump to the next group here? These ones are about provision of services and development. So the first one is about making sure that we're facilitating orderly extension of utility service to undeveloped land. So when new land is developed, making sure that we're extending our utility services to serve that land and doing it in an efficient way. The next one is about maintaining adequate capacity in our wastewater system in terms of collection and treatment to keep up with our growth. The one about seismic resiliency is about making sure that our key wastewater and water facilities are resilient to seismic events. And then the one about water diversification is more about pursuing diverse sources of water so we can maintain a supply of a sustainable supply of drinking water. And so that's just having options in terms of our sources. So we'll jump over to the poll on that one, and folks have questions about those. We've got some folks here from Public Works who can definitely help answer those. And some of these, it's worth mentioning that some of these are things that we generally already do, but we also want to make sure that they are included in the comprehensive plan to make sure that that's something that is prioritized and continued well into the future. So somebody saying these are some complex ideas, not sure what's being asked of us, as it's already things I've heard we're up to. So I guess what we're asking is, do you think these are operations that should be continued in the comprehensive plan? That inclusion in the comprehensive plan makes these things a little bit more official. It means it's a priority that we're going to maintain well into the future. So, you know, I think that if it's something we already do, it's affirming that, yes, we want to continue doing this for the long term. And, you know, other ones are maybe something that can be worked on in an ongoing fashion. So does that answer the question?
And if you want, I guess, more specific examples, I would ask Jason to maybe pop in.
All right. Not seeing anything else in the chat here, so I guess we're gonna keep going. So this next group is primarily about food and then one about historic preservation. So the first policy is about encouraging more grocery stores, food co-ops, community markets to improve access to healthy, fresh food. And that would be especially in areas that have limited access to those sorts of things now. So if you've heard the term food deserts, that would be a policy to address those sorts of areas. The next one is about promoting locally grown food. So things like farmers markets and community gardens to help increase food access and reduce food insecurity. The one about urban animals is about allowing people to keep a limited number of animals that produce food for personal consumption. So this wouldn't be like a farm. This would be more like backyard chickens, that sort of thing. And the city does allow backyard chickens now, but it's not necessarily something that's in our comprehensive plan. So this idea would make that a more official position. And the intent would be to help, I guess, make our food system a bit more resilient in the process. And then the one about archaeological resources, this is one that we pulled from the historic preservation plan and are thinking about rolling up into the comprehensive plan. And it would be about encouraging the preservation of important historic, cultural, archaeological resources and working with tribes, the state, property owners, and developers to ensure that those resources are being preserved. So we'll jump over to the poll here and you guys can agree with whatever you like there. If anybody has questions or comments about these ideas, go ahead. I see a question asking if 13 would refer to grocery stores providing local produce. Not necessarily, although obviously that's a nice thing. I think the intent of this one is to encourage more grocery stores in different parts of the city where maybe there isn't great access to groceries, especially fresh foods right now. So making sure that more people have good access to fresh food. And certainly that could include local produce. We did have a policy idea in our economic policy meeting about more supporting local industry. So that could go along with that idea as well. Other comments on this one? Looks like most people have had a chance to vote there, so why don't we keep moving along? So that's our group of previously drafted policy ideas. We wanted to give people a chance if they had other questions or comments or ideas to share about any of those. This is a great time to do that before we move on to new ideas.
I have a question of Eunice about animals.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know if in the code it still allows for such animals as potbelly pigs and pygmy goats that were allowed, say, in the 1990s. I know we allowed chickens, but what other urban animals do we allow?
Well, we recently changed the code to allow goats for grazing in recent, probably last 5 to 10 years, bees and ducks. I'm not sure if we have made any changes otherwise in the last 5 to 10 years.
So you don't know if potbelly pigs are still allowed?
I
They
will
were a
check that out right
fad.
now. I will check that
Pardon?
out right now. I will check that out right now.
Thank you. And then I had another question about the selling of fresh foods and vegetables and so on. Would that be something that you would encourage to possibly happen in the hubs?
That's a potential area. I think those locations, but I mean, just generally any area that's zoned for commercial retail type uses or mixed use, where there isn't necessarily great access to it now. So parts of West Salem have to go a pretty long way to get to grocery stores, or areas of Northeast Salem don't have great access to fresh food. And so looking at ways to allow those more broadly. And yeah, I think neighborhood hubs could be a place for a small market or produce stand, but you know, that sort of depends on the market and what entrepreneurs want to do as well. So
Okay. Well, how about food carts?
that's a good question. We just got that question a day or two ago as well, and we need to think a little bit about how food carts could or could not be allowed in neighborhood hubs. If you have thoughts about that, we'd be happy to hear them.
I had another question about providing water and sewer services to areas.
Okay, go ahead.
So could Public Works talk a little bit about how that currently works and whether or not they had something else to envision? I mentioned the development over on East Salem on Cordon Road. And one of the reasons why the school district didn't feel like they could develop that property was because it didn't have water service on the fringe of town. And I think they worked out something with county and city and so on, but it was a real impediment to development. And I just wanted him to maybe speak to that, what they plan on doing in the fringes.
Okay, I'll take that one. Specific to I guess the Picksweet property is, I guess, what you're talking about, the East Park subdivision?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that developer has built a $4 million water main from roughly, I think, Kaplinger area, all the
Yes.
way up Cordon Road to serve that development, and then wrapped a water line around it. And so it's quite a cost that most people wouldn't have been able to try to do to make that developable. So that was, and that's just consistent with our master plan. So our master plan shows how to serve these properties. That particular one was odd because it was at the far east end of the suburban East Salem Water District, and there wasn't any suburban East Salem Water District water to serve it. And so that was a very unique situation. But yeah, the normal procedure is we have master plans. The master plans serve out to the urban growth boundary, And so that is how we do it today. I think the idea is that with this comprehensive plan, we're just really setting that in more of an official document, is really formalizing what's already done.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear very clearly what you said about urban service areas.
So the infrastructure master plans plan for infrastructure to the urban growth boundary. So every master plan has a plan for how to serve all area in the UGB. And so that is already something that we do. So the comprehensive plan proposal is not really a major change to what's done now. It's just making it more formalized.
Okay. And how are those funds? Where do you get the funds from for that? Is that SDCs?
Yeah, the
Or-
vast majority would be from SDCs, with some other kinds of developer fees that are augmenting the SDCs, but mostly SDCs.
Okay. And so like in this particular case in East Salem, because they were jumping over such a long area, they had to pick up the total cost?
They fronted the cost. They will get reimbursed eventually through SDCs, so that they won't be out much at all. They'll be out a little bit. The way the regulations work, they only get what we call oversizing around the perimeter, and so they have to pay for the equivalent of an 8-inch pipe around the perimeter of the property, but off-site they get 100% back. So yeah, so they front the money and we pay them back for the most part.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
All right, so we're going to transition to some new ideas, and these ideas come from the comprehensive plans of other cities. And so we've done some research to look at areas where we could fill in some gaps and look for good ideas that are taking place in other places and see if they're right for Salem. The first few, I think I'm going to get help from one of the Public Works folks, and then we'll keep rolling from there. So with these questions we're asking, we've simplified it a little bit. We're just asking a yes or no, do you like this idea or not? So I'll hand it over. And I think it was Jason who was going to start us out.
Yeah, great. So this idea is really aimed at protecting the source of our drinking water. And again, this is nothing new. We have a very robust watershed monitoring program, and we do a lot with our partners and stakeholders in the watershed. But we're looking to memorialize this in our comprehensive plan to really put some more weight behind the work that we are currently doing. And one thing that we did learn from the wildfires last year, as we moved into a recovery effort, I mean, we didn't lose any facilities, none of our land burned, but the impacts on our watershed can be quite dramatic. And so it's really pushing us to beef up our participation in local and regional type of collaborations that looks to protect not only the watershed of the North San Am River, but as we look down the road to the future, we may at some point be leaning on the Willamette River as a water supply for the city. So here we like I said, we just want to memorialize what it is we're doing and kind of beef up where we're going in the future.
Look like there's a comment that says, looks like an easy yes.
Looks like we've got our answers on that one, so why don't we keep moving? Go ahead, Jason.
So this one is a little broader and it covers a lot of areas, but specifically, if I'm speaking to our utility infrastructure, we are taking steps through our master planning endeavors, both on the water and wastewater side, to look at how we can make our systems A, more resilient, and B, more recoverable in the event of a major seismic event or some other type of natural disaster. And so this covers not only hardening the system, in bracing our pipes and pumps and buildings and such, also looking at ways that we can recover faster by either developing alternative water sources or sites within the community where citizens can come and fill up water jugs if the water system is down for a prolonged period of time. So we're currently undertaking some of this through the water master plan, and we're doing a seismic resiliency assessment on all of our critical infrastructure. And we hope that in the next 20 to 30 years, I mean, this will be a long process, but it's going to be a sizable investment. But to be able to have our utility infrastructure withstand a large-scale seismic event, as well as other types of natural disasters, and then learn how to bring those systems back on in an orderly fashion that really will benefit the community by providing service to places where we would have evacuation shelters, where how would we restore service to the hospitals and things like that would affect the overall community recovery.
And bridges.
Yes, well, unfortunately for us, the two bridges that cross the Willamette are managed by ODOT, and if you may be aware that ODOT is embarking on a multi-year project to retrofit the Center Street Bridge to better withstand seismic events. And from what we've learned is that the Marion Street Bridge is there's probably no hope with that one. But we have also within Public Works have looked at our city bridges that cross creeks and other and other waterways. And so we're developing a plan to identify which of those will likely still be standing, which of those will probably not make it, and then ways to route traffic around them.
So on that, I'm aware of those, but in addition to that, is there any kind of a plan or intention to create a plan around creating temporary I know that like a temporary a way for navigation across the creek and so forth. I know that this is a huge issue in West Salem. How do I get to medical services? How do I get to work and so forth? And I always tell them, you're not going to work if we have a major earthquake for quite some time. And there are other hospitals on the Polk County side. But I'm just wondering if surely you've been thinking about how to get basic services across the river if both of the bridges are incapacitated for a while.
Right. In cases like that, I mean, we would hope that either the Buena Vista or the other ferries are still working. There's not much that could be done to bring those bridges back on, especially if they were a total failure. And so I'm not that familiar with the emergency planning on the transportation side. And I'm not quite sure if ODOT has a contingency plan in place on how they would move goods and services other than, going up and down the Willamette corridor and utilizing the, any of the bridges that may still be standing.
So it sounds to me like that should be a discussion for this kind of preparedness planning, is some sort of joint conversation around what are the potentials and what would we need to do in order to have that in place. For example, can we use the landing for the riverboat to ferry things across the river, or are we using the railroad bridges, or are we expecting to take things up to the existing ferries in the hopes that they're not damaged? Anyway, it seems to me like you just pointed out, we need a lot more coordination and preparedness thoughts.
And I would think that it would be a statewide, that would be quite a good statewide issue, because that kind of an emergency, you're looking at National Guard, and that would be a pretty major event. So just, that's a good suggestion. I appreciate that.
All right, why don't we keep going? So I think Glenn was going to take this one. Is that right?
Sure. This one is, again, there's things that we've been doing for a while that are policies, but they're really not at the comprehensive plan level. So this one again is fairly straightforward, that as we develop in the urban growth boundary, that we would have the capacity to make sure we have capacity within our systems to accommodate for that development. And that's really how the master plans are developed at the infrastructure level. And so this is really just taking those policies that are done in each infrastructure master plan and elevating that to the comprehensive plan level. So it's really not anything new. It's kind of how it's done today, just a matter of making it more formal.
All right, looks like we've got our votes on that one. Let's keep going. I think I'm up next. So this new idea is about campus community amenities and services. And what it means is that we would encourage campuses that provide amenities and services to surrounding neighborhoods and emphasize the role of them as a center of community activity. So whether that refers to an institutional campus like a university, or something like a hospital or the state Capitol campus. It could be a range of different types of campuses, but just encouraging those campus institutions to provide amenities and services to the neighborhoods that they're in so that they're benefiting the surroundings. So somebody's saying, is this already a condition of development? So I think there are times when certain community infrastructure is required of development. So whether that's improvements to streets or potentially incentives to provide transit infrastructure, things like that. It doesn't necessarily require developers to provide community space or anything like that. So I think this is maybe a little different. Eunice, do you want to address that?
I was just gonna say, I think the comment in the chat was that Western Oregon University is a good example. They opened up its rec center with a community pass, and it was a condition of approvals. I think what the comment was. Just clarifying.
All right, I'm seeing 3 votes. Right now, I think usually we're seeing about 5, so I'll give folks another minute or 2 here. If anybody else has a question or a comment, please feel free to jump in.
I think I probably should have clarified early on that our public facilities plans are components of the comprehensive plan, similar to the transportation system plan. And so a lot of the detail that Jason and Glenn, for example, are talking about in the more specific infrastructure plans are components of the comprehensive plan. Sorry about not making that clear.
Thanks. All right, let's keep on moving. So this one is about public spaces and making sure that they are functional in all weather conditions. So making sure that whether it's a covered space or using stormwater infrastructure or something like that to ensure that our public spaces can be enjoyed year round, even in rainy weather. That's what this policy would be about.
And someone this afternoon mentioned that covered spaces in parks could be a good example of that, of kind of creating more spaces that could be used again year round. So there's a lot of overlap with other topics we've already covered.
I'm sorry, Eunice, I was distracted by an incoming text. Would you repeat what you just said?
Oh, I was just saying this afternoon when we talked about this policy idea, someone brought up the fact that covered spaces in parks could be a good example so that parks could be used more year round.
All right, we'll keep rolling along here. The next policy is about libraries as gathering spaces. So it would be about fostering the role of libraries as valued community gathering spaces. I know that's something that happens some at our existing libraries. And so this policy would be about really encouraging that and broadening that to make it a more meaningful gathering space. So I have a question here about whether we're talking about interior or exterior, and that's a great question. I think that it could refer to both. I know that there's some public space at the library downtown near City Hall, but I also know that there are some spaces within libraries that can be used for meeting space or gatherings otherwise. So I think that would be both. So I think right now that libraries do serve a role as a gathering space to some extent, but potentially that could be furthered and we could work to do more. All right, looks like we've got our 5 votes. We'll keep going. So this policy is about supporting urban orchards. And so what that means is supporting efforts by probably community groups to inventory and develop the city's urban orchards. So that would be trees that produce some sort of fruit to help increase the resiliency of the local food system and to help reduce food insecurity. So groups like Salem Harvest already work with farmers and I guess some private property owners to harvest food that would otherwise go to waste. And so this would be looking at that idea more broadly and potentially using trees either in parks or potentially street trees if they produced fruit to do something similar. So the word orchard, I think, is an inclusive term. So whether that's just a couple trees somewhere or whether it's like a planted orchard that we think of as like a whole group of fruit trees, I think it could include more broadly than just the traditional idea of an orchard. So I know that in Seattle, there's a group that has mapped all the fruit producing trees in a large portion of Salem. And so they manage those fruit trees and make sure that the fruit from them finds people. Sorry, I didn't let people vote yet. I'll jump back to the text while people are voting. You should still be able to vote. So there's a question that says, would it mean that if I have 2 trees, the city would be involved? Not necessarily. I think this would be about the city supporting those efforts in some way. It could be through a nonprofit, and the city wouldn't necessarily those trees, but they would potentially be able to contribute to helping to map where they are or something like that. But just making sure that that food can be utilized potentially. So yeah, connecting people. Somebody noting that they like the idea of orchards in parks. I like that. All right, so we'll keep going with this one. So that's our new ideas. Give folks one more chance to ask questions about that sort of stuff. And then we'll give folks a chance to share other ideas. So I see a comment that says use and setbacks might make public works happy if they're away from streets. Is that in reference to the trees? I guess I'm not exactly sure what that comment means. Yes, orchards, got it. All right. So feel free to share any other questions that you might have, but we also wanted to give folks a chance to share new ideas that maybe we haven't thought of yet. So if you have an idea that you want to share, this is a great time to do that too.
Great. And just as a reminder, like Austin was saying earlier, this is just a very small sample of the hundreds of policy ideas that are available for input. And again, if you have any new ideas, whether or not they're in an existing document that we put together, we're happy to hear them. Or you can think about it as we move on.
Do you want to keep going?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is our last policy meeting on a specific topic, as I mentioned earlier. And so we're going to be doing additional outreach through our surveys and community meetings, and then incorporating all that into an update, a revision, additions to our different policies, and presenting that back to the community before we take it through an adoption process. The goal is to take the kind of whole package of updates to the comprehensive plan, the goals, the policies, the comprehensive plan map, the zoning map, and the zoning code through an adoption process that we would start by the end of this year. This is just a reminder of our project website, citysalem.net/oursalem, and a little picture of what our links to our policy survey look like there. And it's in English and in Spanish. And if you're really interested in specific ideas, we have a lot of different ideas under different topics. So it'd be great to get your feedback. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of other detailed work we're doing as part of the Our Salem project right now. One of those is the interactive zoning map we launched, I think, just a week and a half ago. And so it's an interactive map where you can zoom into a property and see what's proposed, and then you can provide comments, and so you can drop a pin on that. The interactive map, we've gotten a lot of questions and calls about it. So next week we're going to be answering some of those kind of frequently asked questions, and then leaving time again for Q&A. So next week on Wednesday, in place of these policy meetings, again, 12 and 5:30, we'll be talking about the map. In addition, we have a zoning subcommittee that's made up of 4 planning commissioners and 4 city councilors. And they're looking at different zoning code options that could be implemented to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from transportation. The city set a goal to be carbon neutral by 2050. And so we're looking at what can we do in the zoning code to help make that happen. So the first meeting was a couple weeks ago, and then the next meeting is May 27th. All the information is on the project website, so you can sign up to speak, you can submit comments, or you can just watch it. Well, this is just our information, so feel free to contact me with any questions or comments, or Austin, and this is just our project website. So I just want to leave some space again for if there's anything, any questions you have or any other comments, or Jason, Keith, Glenn, Austin, if there's anything you wanted to add or you thought of, this is the time. So I don't see anything else, and even though it's a small crowd, appreciate everyone coming. It was a good discussion, a lot of good comments, things for us to look into. So I appreciate that. And if you're interested again in the zoning map, I'll see you next week at noon or 5:30 on Wednesday. Thank you.